From the beginning of the Middle Ages, buildings made of wood and then stone emerge as symbols of power, fortified castles. France will gradually be covered in fortresses. Between the 12th and 13th centuries, they become more and more common. Castles of almost identical design are built all over the royal territory. Their magnificent architecture will define the image of a medieval castle for eternity. How can we explain this golden age? Which techniques did medieval architects have to master in order to accomplish such monumental works? During the 1990s, some medieval history enthusiasts came up with a crazy idea: to build a fortified castle using 13th century techniques in order to discover the secrets of the medieval builders and shed new light on a forgotten world. The Guédelon Castle project was born. By recreating a magnificent building from scratch, the team brought the past back to life, and with it, the real meaning of this kind of structure. During this unusual quest, they managed to answer many questions. How did medieval workers choose their stones? Which mortar did they use to bind them together? How did they transport them? And what devices did they use to hoist them, sometimes dozens of feet, into the air? How were the plans for these buildings drawn up? What were the stages involved in such a construction? For more than 20 years, the Guédelon builders and their master mason have been reaching out to their ancestors. They began a real journey back in time. Deep in a forest in Burgundy, Guédelon Castle rises up like a gateway to the 13th century, a magical passageway to the golden age of fortified castles. The first castles appear around the year 1000. Initially, they're only motte and bailey constructions, wooden towers representing feudalism and the power of warlords. Built on artificial mounds, these first towers are surrounded by a series of fences, determining the space to be defended. The first lords, their families, and those who serve them live within this enclosure. These rapidly built wooden buildings mark out the territory, but they have one weakness. They're fragile because they're vulnerable to fire. Very quickly, the wealthiest lords replace their wooden tower with a keep, the seat of feudal power. This time made of stone, the building becomes the key to securing power. The castle has to be a way of administering and defending the lord's territory. Although these buildings multiply during the 11th and 12th centuries, the motte and baileys don't disappear overnight. They coexist with these new castles, the dwellings of men capable of raising the astronomical sums needed for their construction. Between the 10th and 13th centuries, the designs of castles vary considerably. They evolve according to whether the lord building the castle has it built on a rocky outcrop, on a plain, or in the bend of a river. But the thinking behind the construction of these castles is always the same, a fact the Guédelon team has been discovering since the beginning of the project. Begun in 1998, Guédelon will take 25 years to complete. In the 13th century, an identical project would usually be finished in 12 to 15 years, but the wealthiest owners could go much faster. In the Middle Ages, builders would work an average of 200 days a year, 8 hours a day in autumn and winter, and 12 from Easter to September. On Saturdays and the days before a holiday, they would stop working at nones, which is around 3 p.m. In order to build quickly and well, the medieval lords and master masons would choose the ground upon which the castle was to be constructed extremely carefully. It had to be integrated into its surroundings in order to minimize the costs by using readily available materials. Florian Ranucci is Guédelon's master mason. Just like in the Middle Ages, he has to manage the local resources, solve technical issues on site, oversee each stage of the project, and stay within his allocated budget. It's a challenge for the whole team because nobody has attempted a venture such as this for several centuries.
Basically, we'll try and use materials available within a 3 to 5 kilometre radius. When we have the materials on site, it's obviously even better.
The Guédelon builders have therefore gone deep into a thick forest. Oak trees provide the wood needed to make the framework, scaffolding, and lifting gear. Water was everywhere. And in the heart of these mountains, they discovered the holy grail for every castle builder, a stone quarry. Once it's completely finished, the castle will have absorbed 10,000 cubic meters of stone. That's 25,000 tons of sandstone, the weight of 3 Eiffel Towers or 61 Boeing 747s.
In Guédelon, the castle is built directly on a ferruginous sandstone quarry. It's sand that's been glued together by iron oxide, so there's ochre present. This generates sedimented layers, which are easy to separate. It's a rock that's cleaved. By using a sledgehammer, we can separate the stones, which will give us 3 different qualities. The first we used for blocks of dressed stone, for realignment courses and for steps and thresholds. The second, the broken stones are going to make the rubble, the headers and ashlars, which are the stones on the front wall of the castle. The third quality of stone is the offcuts, which we use to fill the inside of the wall.
The quarrymen had to learn to read the stone. They had to study it, decipher it, in order to understand it and use it to its full potential. The bluer the stone, the harder it is to carve. They rediscovered the technique used to extract the blocks. Wedge holes have to be made at the point at which the quarrymen want the stone to break. They then insert metal wedges and hit them with the sledgehammer, so that the shock waves break the stone, creating large slabs.
Some blocks can weigh between 100 kilos and 3 or 4 tons. With these very heavy blocks, we look for the weak spot instead of the layer. Once we find the weak point in the stone, we can split it with just a small wedge without too much effort. There are only 2 of us quarrymen in Guédelon, along with some of the builders who give us a hand. Back then, there were maybe 50, 60, 80. We don't really know.
By studying the soil around the site, the builders found other hidden treasures. The soil in Guédelon is composed of loam, clay, and sand. The loam found at surface level will be used to make roof and floor tiles for the castle. The purer clay found at a deeper level will be used to make crockery. And sand will be an ingredient of a key element in the construction: mortar. All the stones in Guédelon will be bound together. The mortar makers prepare the mixture. In the Middle Ages, these craftsmen were usually free men, just like stone carvers, masons, or carpenters. This says a lot about their skill and their importance on the site.
It was the Romans who perfected mortar making with sand and lime. We have 2,000 years of Roman technology behind us, which resulted in the creation of vaults in lime concrete, which are still standing today in Rome and Ostia. The problem in the medieval world was bringing back these techniques and making them as effective as possible in order to build really solid stone walls. That's part of our research. In medieval times, the masons were the chemists of construction, so much so that we have a group of masons who specialize in making mortar.
The modern builders studied illuminated manuscripts and recreated tools, such as the scuffle hoe used on the site. But they still had to work out how medieval mortar was made. A scientific investigation began.
To put it simply, mortar is the glue that binds the stones together. For the mixture, you need lime, sand and water. At the beginning, we used industrial mortar with sand that wasn't local. But the scientific committee thought this mortar wasn't right. Anne Baude, who's a member of the scientific committee and a professor at the University of Lyon, introduced us to Christian Le Barrier, a mortar specialist. He visited the site, saw how we worked, took the sand we had and mixed it with some lime in an artisanal way. This produced a different kind of mortar from the one we'd been using before. Christian carried out some comparative studies in Ratilly, which is 5 kilometres from here, and Saint-Fargeau Castle, which also has a 13th century base. And he found the same composition. So we're really recreating what was done back then.
The lime used on the site is made of calcareous stone, heated to a very high temperature, 900 degrees Celsius. It is then immersed in troughs of water, where it turns into a white paste, which hardens in contact with the air. Although the lime used in Guédelon is bought from a lime burner, who makes it using traditional methods, a lime kiln with a capacity of 4 cubic meters was also built, according to archaeological models studied by the Agricultural Research Institute, the INRA. And it works perfectly. The dehydrated stone expands in contact with the water, then turns into a creamy foam.
What we call slaking the lime is the process of rehydrating the stone. When it's burned, it loses water and carbonic gas. It's then called quicklime. When it's heated, it goes from being calcium hydroxide to calcium carbonate. When calcium carbonate is immersed in water, it releases heat. When this happens, it turns into a paste.
This paste will be used to make the mortar, as well as lime plaster and other lime washes. In Guédelon, all the primary resources are on site, including iron.
The human adventure of this site has consisted of going that extra mile in the transformation of materials. And the stone from the quarry contains enough iron oxide to allow us to extract ore from it. The blacksmiths become metal workers, and several times throughout the year they'll do reductions, which is when the stone is heated to 1400 degrees Celsius in order to produce iron and steel.
The reduction of more than 20 kilos of ore produces approximately 1.5 kilos of metal, which is immediately tested by the blacksmiths.
Part of it is very dense. It's obviously metal. Heating it several times in the forge allows us to work it properly and extract a little bit of iron or steel. After that, the aim is to work it to see how it behaves when it's being worked, and then to find out if we can use it for either metalwork or for making tools for the construction of the castle.
In the 12th and 13th centuries, forges spring up everywhere, thanks in particular to the use of hydraulic energy. In Guédelon, all the metal tools are made on site, and every day the metal workers maintain the tools, especially those used by the stone carvers, which are put to heavy use. The construction site is also at the heart of another essential supply source for the work, the forest.
Guédelon Forest has supplied us with a lot of timber, especially oak, which is what we use most on the site. More than 90%. We use it for all the timber frames, to make the doors, and all the other wooden elements used for defence. We also use other kinds such as beech, hornbeam, white beam, which we use to make smaller things such as mill gears and tool handles. We also use much smaller kinds such as wicker, which we use to make baskets to carry mortar and other things. We have fragments of wood that were found in the dig that prove it, so there's no doubt about it. We're sure that all the timber frames in medieval times and even much later were made with oak. That's undeniable.
The carpenters have set up workshops called lodges. They work closely with the master mason, masons, stone carvers and blacksmiths. They make wheelbarrows, troughs for the mortar, scaffolding, master beams for the dwellings and rafters, and large-scale structures like the bridge over the moat. A real jigsaw puzzle with wooden pieces. Around 57 oak trees were felled, squared off and shaped to make the piles, decking and sleepers for the bridge. 700 long, large-headed nails were forged to attach the deck to the beams. This completely unique construction site had a few surprises in store for the Guédelon builders. It's a great adventure in experimental archaeology.
While working on the front part of the bridge, we realised that after 10 to 15 years, a nail that goes through wood creates a gutter, which causes deterioration in the wood. So now, the footbridge we've designed to reach the courtyard to get to the castle has been entirely designed without nails. The planks are set in wooden grooves, which is a truly medieval method. Experimental archaeology consists of keeping what works and eventually rejecting what doesn't. It's as simple as that.
The forest around the castle also supplies the wood needed to make the shingles, wooden tiles, sometimes equipped with fixing pegs, which will be stored before being used.
It's a whole ecosystem that's turning into a castle. All the materials will be used in a well-thought-out way, both for the main construction and the finishing.
If castles have been built for the same reason since 1000 AD, protecting the lord and defending a territory, the structures built during the 13th century are influenced by the political, economic, and cultural changes of their time. During the 12th century, with the increase in agricultural yields, living conditions improve for a part of the population, and some peasants leave the countryside and move to the cities, which are growing fast. These new city dwellers join the ranks of a growing number of craftsmen, providing an increasingly skilled workforce for the thousands of construction sites opening at that time. The workers specialize and become metal workers, masons, stone carvers, carpenters, mortar makers, and woodcutters. Cities become independent decision-making centers, emancipated from the tutelage of the lords and the church. The largest cities develop trade and facilitate exchanges between regions by holding fairs and markets. In June 1204, Philip II, the seventh king of the House of Capet, is made King of France and no longer King of the Franks. Born in 1165, the new sovereign will restore his influence in every province held by royal vassals and considerably extend the royal territory. Between 1199 and 1214, Philip embarks on a series of expeditions to reconquer the French territory. In the north, he takes back Artois, Boulonnais, Valois, and Vermandois. In the west, he annexes Normand-Vexin, Normandy, Brittany, Maine, Poitou, Touraine, and Anjou. In the center, he annexes Berry and Auvergne. Finally, in the east, he claims back the Champagne region. To administer his new conquests, the king appoints state representatives independent of the nobility. And above all, to defend his territories and keep them within the crown, he constructs a substantial number of fortified castles built to a standardized plan in order to control costs. The first of these castles is built in Paris. Before leaving for the Third Crusade in 1195, Philip wants to protect the city. In the west, he builds a strong fortress, the Louvre. The seasoned troops stationed there can confront potential attackers coming up the Seine. It can also block the road leading to Normandy, at that time in the hands of Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart. The building forms a square enclosure, each side 70 meters long, reinforced by 10 circular towers, one in each corner and one in the center of the west and north sides. Twin towers flank the gates in the center of the east and south sides. In the center of the courtyard stands a keep on a cylindrical base 6 meters high. Standing 30 meters tall, the keep is 15 meters in diameter. Its walls are around 4 meters thick. In the courtyard, built against the west and south walls, are the garrison's quarters. The Louvre and the ramparts surrounding Paris will be the inspiration for a multitude of castles built or remodeled between 1202 and 1220. But it's the royal castle of Dourdan that will become the standard model for fortresses built by Philip II's successors, his son Louis VIII and his grandson Louis IX, known as Saint Louis. Provence and the county of Toulouse become part of the kingdom. Louis IX will unify and consolidate the legacy. Under his reign, between 1226 and 1270, he pursues the Capetian dream of a country extending from Brest to Strasbourg and from Lille to Aigues-Mortes. The builders in Guédelon have been inspired by this period. The design for their castle has the style of that time. Guédelon comprises a curtain wall with a door between two towers, two flanking towers to the east and west, an imposing keep, a fifth slightly smaller tower containing a chapel, and in the courtyard, the Lord's dwelling. The roof of this dwelling was covered with 25,000 handmade tiles. The tilemaker's experience is a perfect example of the experimental archaeology which is the hallmark of the Guédelon construction site. The workers rediscovered methods that had been lost for decades. The tilemakers pug the clay, mixing it with water to break it up and extract impurities such as stones, leaves, and pieces of wood. They then cut it into slabs before wedging it once again to make it homogeneous. Once molded, the tiles are left to dry on racks. Firing the tiles raised many problems for the team.
We did several tests with kilns. We tried at least 5 kilns before we were able to start making our own tiles from 2009. The first batch was black, a bit overfired, but we still used them. We went to visit a tile maker in Corbeny, in Nièvre. He gave us some advice. We had to place the tiles vertically, in a quincuntial formation, so the heat and the flames pass through the tiles. You can't increase the temperature too quickly. If you increase the temperature too fast, the tiles will break. You hear little noises, and that's not a good sign. You have to push the embers to each side, so you have the same thickness of embers on either side of the flues. We improved the colour and firing times. The weather is also crucial to this process. If the weather's dry, the batch will be much better. It's great because this is my 26th batch and I'm still learning on the job, because I experiment with new things each year. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll try something else. That's how we experiment in Guédelon.
Fired at 1100 degrees, these tiles can last hundreds of years. From the middle of the 12th and during the 13th century, 80 cathedrals spring up from the ground in the Kingdom of France. Gothic architecture becomes so complex that it requires incredible technical expertise. On the big sites, master masons meet and share their knowledge. But how did the Guédelon builders choose their construction techniques?
The guides we have to building a 13th century castle are obviously the castles themselves. We have Ratilly right next door, which gave us a model for using ferruginous sandstone and the way of using it to be in line with the local building style. We also have construction reports. The accounts from Dry-les-Bellefontaines show us the type of roofing used. And finally, the most important resource from where we learned everything we know about daily life at the time, illuminated manuscripts. So drawings from the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries of castles that could have been built by a lord of average status.
The result of this vast amount of documentation and research is amazing. Characters from medieval stained glass windows in illuminated manuscripts come to life before our eyes. The construction site is buzzing. The workers are here. Stone carvers under their wooden lean-tos. Woodcutters squaring off freshly cut trees. Mortar makers mixing sand and lime. Masons perched on scaffolding, patiently building the walls. The tools are identical, just like the hoisting gear and means of transport. From the beginning, some things become obvious to the builders.
At the start, we had troughs and buckets that were extremely heavy. They were heavy in themselves, and when they were filled with mortar, they were unmanageable. We realized that in all the illuminated manuscripts and stained glass windows, there are baskets, containers with handles made of wicker, woven wicker, which means that you're only lifting the weight of the mortar. So we created a basket weaving workshop, and now all the masons on the site use these baskets, which are much lighter and in accordance with what we see in the illuminated manuscripts.
These iconographic sources showed the team the type of tools used by the stone carvers. Chisels, splitters, and mallets, all required for obtaining the high level of precision demanded by the workers.
All the prestige of the 12th and 13th century comes from the use of the dressed stone. Not the rubble, the broken stone, but the dressed stone. While doing this sort of work, the masons will have to cut stones that are perfectly square and accurate to the last millimetre. So the stonecutter's job consists of working out the thickness of the joints so that the stones fit perfectly.
In the Middle Ages, the master mason's role is crucial. He guarantees the balance of forces involved in the construction, the ever higher and more elaborate masonry, the increasingly slender arches and the vaults supporting ton upon ton of stones. However, on this site, there are no plans on parchment. In this workshop, the master mason sketches out full-scale outlines. He gives his stonemasons and carpenters templates so that they can follow his instructions and carry out the work.
See what we have here. 2 by 6.
En fait, c'est cette distance-là, il faudrait diviser en 7.
The more precise we are when drawing the outlines, the more accurate and perfect the dressed stones will be. The quadrivium, a curriculum implemented by Charlemagne, is the study of geometry, mainly Greek geometry, in which elements of Euclid and Pythagoras are taught. So their knowledge of geometry encompasses the plane geometry studied in primary and middle schools nowadays. The medieval world is pragmatic. They used knowledge from ancient times to make their society function.
The vaults in Guédelon are a real challenge to gravity. For the first time since the Middle Ages, the workers have attempted a difficult task: cutting a complex group of dressed stones in order to make cross-rib vaults. For the vault on the ground floor of the chapel tower, the masons made 6 bases, 54 voussoirs 25 centimeters thick, and a keystone to keep the whole thing together. The stones have engravings indicating the direction in which they should be laid, their position relative to the next stone, and a mason's mark, a quickly made and easily recognizable symbol allowing each mason to be paid for his work. For the cross-ribbed vault, the carpenters built a wooden frame to support the assembled stones. The forces exerted between the voussoirs make the structure stable. Once the frame is removed, the cross-rib vault takes the weight and the stones fit into place. In the shooting gallery of the keep, the keystone is 5.5 meters up. It is covered by an 80-centimeter layer of stone, which forms the floor above. The total volume balanced over this open space amounts to 50 cubic meters, an astronomical weight of 120 tons. In the carpenter's workshop, another plan has been traced on the floor. On this huge drawing board, beam after beam of the future framework of the chapel tower is adjusted and assembled.
After that, it's disassembled and entirely reassembled in position on the tower.
The real challenge is trying to find wood with a natural curve in order to respect the rounded shape of the tower. The wood shouldn't have to adapt to the plan or to us, it's the other way around. We made templates and went into the forest with them to see if the trees corresponded with the curves that we needed.
They will be able to make assemblies that are extremely precise, incorporating all the detail that we get in 3D software nowadays. Carpenters have their software in their heads and hands. Move it a bit more towards you.
The verification will actually take place in situ. We can't really know beforehand if everything's going to fit. So yes, there's always a bit of apprehension.
It's not until the end of the Middle Ages that reduced-scale plans as we know them today come into use. In the meantime, the master masons develop so much skill that they turn from simple local entrepreneurs into real architects. The National Library of France holds a real gem, Villard de Honnecourt's notebooks, a master mason born in the 13th century near Cambrai. During his apprenticeship, he goes from site to site and from city to city. His writings relate a part of his journey. He starts off at Vaucelles, near Cambrai, where he works on the construction of the Cistercian Abbey. Then he goes to Reims, Laon, Chartres and Lausanne, and around 1234 he takes part in the construction of a cathedral in Košice, in Hungary. These parchment pages include naturalistic illustrations, drawings of people, and a self-portrait of him as a warrior. He also depicts allegories and religious drawings. 74 of the 250 drawings concern architecture and geometrical studies. But Honnecourt also drew lifting machinery and war machines, because the art of building fortified castles cannot be separated from that of war. There were no ancient war machines during the early Middle Ages in the 10th and 11th centuries, for a good reason. The first stone fortifications were often confronted by small troops of infantrymen and horsemen, but during the Crusades in the 12th and 13th centuries, Frank attackers had to resuscitate the war machines in order to take possession of fortified cities. They therefore brought back plans and models of these formidable machines. Transportable siege towers as tall as the curtain walls, battering rams, scaling ladders, catapults, and mantlets. The Royal Army comprised hundreds or even thousands of men. In the 12th and 13th centuries, attack takes precedence over defense. Sovereigns used the services of one of several engineers, often clerks passionate about ancient literature, who rediscover the war machines, onagers, catapults, ballistas, by reading texts written by Archimedes, Vitruvius, Vegetius, or Damian Marcellin. The devices, transported in pieces on wagons, are generally stone-throwing machines, counterweight catapults, capable of launching projectiles weighing 12 kilos over distances of up to 175 meters with an impressive degree of accuracy. To confront these new threats, castle architecture had to be significantly adapted. During the 13th century, the wooden hoardings which were vulnerable to ballistic devices disappear, to be replaced by corbelled constructions with brattices, small rectangular or sloping structures, and machicolations, openings in the galleries running along the top of the curtain wall. The progress in construction methods makes these fortifications even stronger and more difficult to approach. Castles built on plains sit on a strong sloping base, a talus.
In the first few years, we had to start by building the base of the castle. So the whole base, with this sloping wall, which is more than 250 meters long, comprising about 3,000 cubic meters, took us 4 years to complete.
In Guédelon, the talus of the 6 towers and curtain walls comprises 3,000 cubic meters of stone, approximately 6,000 tons. The length of the walls is impressive. Once completed, the masons will have built 250 meters of ramparts, a colossal task.
We had to support one another. When we were doing the last 10 stones, we'd send messages to each other. Stone cutters to masons, it's the last but one stone. It's the last stone. Until we finally reached this line all around the base of the castle. Then we could start building the vertical wall. At the same time, it was an opportunity to follow in the great tradition of the medieval builders, because all the 13th century walls and castles went through this exhausting stage of talus fortification.
The study of medieval walls allows each stage of the building work to be recreated. The wall is built with successive layers of stones, like a millefeuille. Layers of rubble, uncut stone, alternate approximately every 3 meters with 3 levels, 3 courses of cut stone. These are realignment courses. At regular intervals, the walls also have holes, whose function was a mystery for a long time. They're putlog holes, notches a meter deep, into which the ends of long oak beams are inserted in order to support scaffolding. The carpenters move them as they work their way up the building. The rows of putlog holes are 1.4 meters apart, an ideal height for the masons and stonecutters to work at. After the holes have been used, they're generally filled with sandstone plugs that can be removed if the building needs restoration. The scaffolding sets the pace for the construction of castles, whose walls get progressively higher. To lift the building materials, sometimes more than 10 meters from the ground, the carpenters at Guédelon have a hoisting device, a tread wheel, which had to be reconstructed.
To make these medieval tread wheels, we looked at existing tread wheels found in cathedrals such as Strasbourg, Canterbury in England, or Bourges, like this one. There are some with 2 drums, like the one in the Wenceslas Bible, which is kept in Prague, that depicts a complete treadwheel crane with its rope and pulley system. We use the treadwheels every day here in Guédelon.
Allez, stop.
Stop. We work with a double-wheel treadwheel. 2 people walk inside the wheel to activate a rope and lift the loads, either mortar or stones. We're lucky to have a treadwheel on an axle, which means we can rotate it 360 degrees. At any time, I can stop or start it again with the central brake here. These 2 pedals stop or start the wheel.
This hoisting device, known since Roman times, works thanks to force multiplication. The wheels, which are 2 to 3 meters in diameter with wooden spokes, rotated together, one either side of an axle, around which wound a rope, pulling the load to be lifted. The lifting force is increased tenfold, meaning that one man can lift a load weighing up to 500 kilos. This ancestor of the crane enables loads of up to 600 kilos to be lifted as high as 15 meters. Treadwheel cranes can be dismantled and reassembled anywhere on the site, even on top of the walls.
Super. Contact. Gardez le contact.
There are some techniques that help us with our work. For example, the walls are built in levels, in layers of stone, where the wall from one layer to another is perfectly horizontal. This means that we can use the wall itself as a building tool. We can move the stone along on rollers into its place, where it will be sealed.
It's pretty much in place.
Encore un tout petit peu.
It's pretty much in place.
Là.
It's pretty much in place.
Quasiment à sa place.
It's pretty much in place.
With Philip II's architecture, notably in the Louvre and Dourdan, defense becomes active. This mass of stone is not the sole defensive feature. It is now designed to strike the attacker, as much as to prevent him breaching its walls. In the 13th century, constructions are increasingly elaborate, the architecture turning towards the active defense of the castle.
This active defence, as reinvented by Philip II at the beginning of the 13th century, is the addition of ditches, ramparts, doors between two towers, and of course the keep. So the curtain walls, which surround the entire periphery of the castle, are at least 1.5 metres thick, providing room to walk around, while the parapet walls, half a metre thick, are lined with crenels and merlons. Their average height is 2 metres. This allows the castle to be defended from the top. We protect ourselves behind the merlons and throw stones or shoot with bows or crossbows. During his reign, Philip will standardise the use of round towers to flank a corner of the castle. He didn't really invent this shape because it had existed since Roman times and even in the 12th century. But he will introduce one major improvement, the use of arrow loops. The round towers will have small openings from which bowmen will shoot, enabling flanking and circular fire. The rotundity of these towers makes them less vulnerable to attack by catapults firing stones, far less vulnerable than square towers. That's why, from the year 1200, it's castles with round towers that establish themselves throughout the Capetian world.
But how did medieval master masons draw perfectly round towers? Huge compasses, comprising a mast and a horizontal pole, are built and set at the centre of the towers. When the compass turns, the plumb line attached to the pole draws a perfect circle. From now on, castles are increasingly well prepared for potential attacks. The ditches surrounding them are made deeper and deeper, 12 metres deep in Dordogne, 22 metres deep in Courcy. The door between the two towers is impassable because of its portcullis, a latticed grille made of wood. The walls, furnished with crenellations and a continuous walkway, are dotted with towers pierced with arrow loops, whose firing range has been meticulously calculated.
Here we are in the shooting gallery on the ground floor of the main tower. The walls are 3 metres thick, which more or less corresponds to the radius of the room, which is 6 metres in diameter. This room is equipped with 5 arrow loops. The bowmen shoot from within this room. No question of firing from inside the arrow loop, since the sills slope downwards. But this enables the bowmen to shoot at the foot of the wall.
Chantal Porte is field archery world champion. She's agreed to do a little experiment.
We've placed a target on the bridge, which is around 15 metres away. What we want to know is, can we get an arrow straight through the arrow loop, which is only 7 centimetres wide, and do you think we'll be able to get a wider firing angle and cover a fan-shaped area 10 or 15 metres wide in front of us?
Well, I don't know. I've never tried anything like this before.
Is this a first?
It is indeed. We'll start by trying to shoot straight ahead, because this 8-centimetre gap is already pretty scary. After that, if everything goes well, we'll try for the wider angle and see what we can do.
Wow, that's amazing. Bravo. That means it works.
It works.
Here, on this axis, it's perfect. Now we're going to try something trickier to see if we can shoot parallel with a splayed wall and extend the area we can cover outside.
The target has now been moved 10 metres to one side.
Wow, a perfect bullseye.
I was a bit skeptical, but I think we can trust the people from the Middle Ages. They tested it out and I think they were right.
It means that with a 7-centimetre wide arrow loop and a metre thick sill, we can cover an area of more than 10 metres. Could there have been several archers shooting at once?
Yes.
The fortified castle protects the land it dominates. Perched on the walls or hidden behind the guard's house and towers, the garrison can actively defend it and inflict severe casualties on the attacking enemy.
Tire dessus une fois que t'es chargé là.
The efficiency of this architecture is such that castles can be built either on plains or at the bottom of valleys. There's no longer any need to build them high up. In the 13th century, the shape of fortified castles changes. The resurgence of cities, with their episcopal palaces and wonderful abodes for an increasingly influential bourgeoisie, inspire the aristocracy. The quest for comfort and light prevails. The building is so strong that the keep is sometimes removed. It is generally relocated to one of the corners, leaving room for the lord's dwelling, built in the inner courtyard against a high wall, just like in Guédelon.
From the moment that castles are laid out around courtyards, providing them with a kind of shell, the facades facing the courtyard don't need to be so overprotected and defensive as keeps were in the 11th and 12th centuries with their small windows. We start to see windows being made in the lord's dwelling, so these are gemmel windows common in the mid-13th century.
The decorative power of these windows lies in their composition. They consist of two rectangular openings with a central mullion. The uprights support a broken arch, which takes the weight off the lintels, forming a tympanum. The lintels on top of the openings are carved with trefoils. The combination of these elements provides a more decorative facade than mere lintels, even if the windows remain the same size. Inside, stone window seats set into the thick walls allow the castle's occupants to benefit fully from the light of day.
There's a desire to give the castle an ostentatious side, a decorative side, to highlight the lord's economic power and give his dwelling status.
The castle is therefore much more than a simple defensive tool. It is the home and the hub of the political and administrative power of the lord, who is part of a pyramid, at the top of which is one single man, the king. The size and architecture of each stronghold is determined by the social status of the lord who will occupy it in the name of the sovereign. Under his fiefdom, the lord can exercise the right of ban, which authorizes him to receive a direct and indirect income. In the 13th century, people of modest means were granted fiefs, thanks to their bravery in battle, or simply through marriage or inheritance. The Lord of Guédelon held the right to dispense middle and low justice. His function and rank determined the architecture of his dwelling. Apart from the defensive features of this sort of architecture, the crenellated curtain wall, flanking towers, the keep, and the chapel tower, the castle possesses an impressive seigneurial dwelling. On the ground floor, a kitchen and a cellar. On the first floor, a great hall, the aula, reached by a large staircase.
This staircase, known in French as the Grand Degré staircase, isn't just functional. It has a symbolic role. It illustrates the power of seigneurial justice.
It's at the foot of these stairs, on a wide stone step, that the Lord would pass judgment. The most humble lords can only dispense middle and low justice. They settle disputes between peasants and pass judgment on petty offences. More powerful lords have the right to dispense high justice. They can impose any form of punishment, including the death penalty.
The banal rights associated with territory impose an incredible number of rules. There's land that's reserved for the villagers, other reserved for the lords. So, catching a rabbit or felling a tree on the lord's land is enough to expose you to severe punishment. So the stairs are well and truly the symbol of this seigneurial power.
The Great Hall in the Lord's dwelling, the aula, is the place for arbitration. This is where legal acts are sealed. It is also where the great ceremonies of feudal life take place, such as the act of homage, in which a free man places himself under the protection of another, more powerful free man, his overlord.
Do you agree to be my vassal?
Yes, I do. Homage is when an important lord grants a vassal territory in exchange for his fidelity. This ceremony is accompanied by a ritual that will bring this world of noble warriors together. So the banquets, the minstrels, are all a codification. Hunting for several days, it's about sharing the same rituals, to become one with a society that, in essence, doesn't mix with either clergymen or with the peasants.
The status of the nobleman occupying the castle demands a social life that takes place in this great hall. The aula is the place for banquets and feasts. It's where people dance and stay up very late, telling each other tales of war or discussing political affairs. There's very little furniture, often just chests used for seating. Everything within the room needs to be easily transportable. At the end of the evening, important guests are invited to stay in the castle. They sleep in a room adjacent to the Great Hall. The walls have been carefully decorated with paintings inspired by other lords' dwellings or nearby churches, like the ones in Moutier. The Guédelon team employed a very ancient technique to brighten up the drab walls of this room: lime wash, using pigments collected on site, such as ochres from Puissé.
The walls are plastered with lime plaster, which will then be painted with a lime wash made with a lime mixture, which will give us a white background on which to paint. This lime plaster will regulate humidity, allowing the wall to breathe and absorb any excess moisture. Since we're painting on dry plaster, we have to use binders to make it last. So we'll add a whole egg, beaten up as if for an omelette, and then some hide glue, because there's collagen in hide glue, and this mixture hardly flakes at all.
All the pigments used are natural, extracted from the land around Puissé.
All the raw materials are in these baskets: stone, soil, sand, clay from the sites surrounding the castle. Ochre is a metal oxide that's present in these materials. Ochre is Greek for yellow, so we're in the yellow family. The stone is ground and sieved to obtain the finest powder possible. As for the sand and clay, we wash it and the sieve will catch everything we don't want, such as gravel and roots, leaving a coloured liquid. We dry this liquid, and when it's dry we make it into powder. The powder being mineral, we can store it almost indefinitely until we use it to make paint. Certain colours will be used as they are, and others will be reddened. Heating it to 800 or 900 degrees makes the paint redder. It'll go from beige to pink, from yellow to red. Reddening the paint will also make a dull, boring brown, a reddish brown like hematite. So being able to get any colour you want also shows that you have the means to obtain it. So the wealthier the lord ordering the work, the more elaborate and extensive the decorations will be. This triangular frieze is seen everywhere. Also the pleated ribbon pattern, which has existed for several centuries, and these trees and vines, which are completely local.
In Guédelon, the seigneurial couple's bedchamber, the camera, is found on the top floor of the main tower, which is still under construction. But the one on the first floor already possesses all the elements of a residential space: a fireplace, latrines, slit windows to defend the space, but also a window overlooking the courtyard. This room is at the heart of a real little bastion. Outside, the tower entrance is protected by a hoarding, and inside by the murder hole, protecting the staircase door. The basement comprises a well, making the keep completely self-sufficient in water.
Water is crucial in a fortified castle because you have to hold out and have your own source of water during a siege. You also need it in daily life and, of course, to build the castle itself. In Guédelon and Puisay, water is never far away. We dug down 7 meters, and the distinctive feature of this well is that at the time there were banks of ferruginous sandstone that were homogeneous and big enough to contain a monolithic rim. The rim of the well is made of one piece of stone that was hollowed out by 2 stonemasons in about 6 weeks. It is an external sign of wealth, but we can assume that the Lord of Guédelon could afford this small luxury because of the quarry. It's one of Guédelon's little masterpieces.
In Guédelon, water is stored everywhere. The cisterns in the chapel tower and the great tower collect water by capillary action. The castle can withstand a siege without having to fetch water from elsewhere. The autonomy of this stronghold is reinforced by the other important room after the Great Hall, the cellar.
The cellar is the heart of a castle or a fief's economy. The Lord's role is to manage the territory, and in order to do this, he will collect taxes, directly or indirectly, which will make up the revenue from his banal rights. The tax isn't necessarily taken in monetary form. It can be paid in bags of grain or flour. So the cellar is the equivalent of the public treasury, but concentrated in one room in the castle intended for this purpose.
The Lord of Guédelon is the master of a fief, the exploitation of which gives him a considerable income. The fortified castle is not only a military camp, but the economic center of a whole region. The Lord has had a tile kiln and a mill built on his land. Exercising the rights of the ban and justice and imposing taxes gives him sources of income, which are normally paid in the form of comestible goods, carefully stored in the cellar.
Since there's a lot of flour, sacks of grain, we need to stop rodents and birds getting in. So the cellar is recognizable by these rabbets in the doorway, these steps, that mean that when the door is shut, it's hermetically closed, including the threshold. The same goes for the basement windows, where wooden shutters are installed to stop the birds getting in. The walls also have to be sound, so they will be plastered and painted with lime wash. Of course, there will also be shelves against all the walls, and sometimes registers recording everything received in the cellar.
Building up the castle's reserves entails a lot of work. This is why the Lord prefers his peasants to pay in kind rather than cash. They have to bring in grain, press the grapes, salt or smoke the meat or fish caught in the fief's ponds, and most of all, bake bread, of which people in the Middle Ages eat 1 kilo a day. The kitchen is on the ground floor of the Lord's dwelling. It has a big chimney equipped with 2 main fireplaces, a cooking fire with a spit, and a kitchen oven used for many different purposes. After having meticulously washed his hands, the Lord and his mesney, the people of the castle, sit down to eat. In a corner, some passing minstrels, a troubadour declaiming verses. In the 13th century, during Lent, the Lord's meal would comprise 4 or 5 fish dishes, pike or carp, fished from the nearby ponds. The most elaborate meals include meat, mostly game, which only he is allowed to hunt on his territory. The meat is boiled or roasted, accompanied by highly spiced cold or warm sauces. There are very few green vegetables, except during spring. The dishes are particularly heavy, and the guests drink pomade, cider, fermented ale, or water with licorice or honey. Wine is obviously the drink of choice for the wealthiest lords, who have it brought in at great expense if they can't produce it themselves. These meals can last for hours, giving heart to a fortress built to defend itself from the harmful effects of war, and where life sometimes passes slowly. Meals also bring the people of the castle together, as well as clients, vassals, and kinsmen entirely devoted to the lord. The castle becomes the showplace for the power of a man and his family. The golden age of fortified castles during the 12th and 13th centuries didn't only bring architectural developments and technological progress, it represented the birth of a state until then in gestation and the structuring of towns and countryside. Soon the power of feudal lords will diminish as the power of kings becomes increasingly strong. Castles will suffer the same fate as their owners. Guédelon Castle is not just another fortress planted in the landscape. Its construction makes sense, and the message it whispers in our ears has been passed down through the centuries, as if the modern workers, in addition to the gestures and techniques, have revived the symbolic meaning of the building. The achievement of the Guédelon project team is unique. Every stone laid, every architectural or decorative feature forms part of the memories of the men and women who have passed through the site. This work will stand throughout the millennia as a reminder of the lives that once came together to achieve it.